Chi-Com red balloon to be blown out of the sky, but the big guy said over the weekend, hey, look, I made the call. I made the call Wednesday. Then it was just a matter of waiting for the opportune moment.
Briefed on the balloon. I ordered the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible. They decided, without doing damage to anyone on the ground, they decided that the best time to do that was as it got over water outside within the 12-mile limit. They successfully took it down, and I want to compliment our aviators who did it, and we'll have more to report on this a little later. Thank you.
Mr. President, what did you say about China? What's the message to China?
You were saying the recommendation was from your national security.
I told them to shoot it down.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
But the recommendation
They said to me, let's wait till the safest place to do it.
Mm-hmm. And the question of whether this was just an accident, that this spy balloon just somehow drifted off course like the SS Minnow in Gilligan's Island. Right. Richard Haas, deep thinker from the Council on Foreign Relations, was on with that yapping little terrier, Chuck Todd. And he's not so sure because it's just so inconsistent with what we've seen from the Chi-Coms diplomatically.
Let's talk about the context. China has been on a decided charm offensive for several months. They've clearly wanted to lower the temperature, improve U.S. The idea that they would use this balloon intentionally to be a provocation on the eve of this trip, possible, but it's so inconsistent with everything that is going on of late. If I were the Chinese thinking of provocations, I would think something in Taiwan would be a much more obvious place to do it. This doesn't seem to me at all obvious. Indeed, I would raise fundamental questions of two things. What was the intentionality here?
Yeah.
Was it to fly this balloon at this altitude at this time? And then the decision making. All I'll say is it does not fit into the larger pattern of Chinese diplomacy of the last few months. It's a rare area, shall we say, of bipartisan consensus. You'd be hard-pressed to see fundamental differences between the Trump foreign policy toward China and the Biden administration towards China. But again, China several months ago, after, given the COVID problems, after the 20th Party Congress, they have done a number of things, sent a number of messages to lower the temperature in U.S.-Chinese relationship. They wanted it as if they wanted to put off any crisis or confrontation, I think, for several years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, isn't he cute? Richard Haas. He's just darling. I remember being that age. Well, I don't actually because he's much older than I am. But I remember being perhaps that naive. No, actually, I don't because I believe people when they show you who they are. It's possible, just possible. This wasn't asked because it's too obvious a follow-up. Is it possible, just possible, that the charm offensive is fraudulent? Congressman Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin, who has been tapped to head the China Select Committee on Maria Bartiromo yesterday.
Well, letting a Chinese surveillance balloon lazily drift over America is like seeing a robber on your front porch and inviting him in, showing him where you keep your safe, where you keep your guns, where your children sleep at night, and then politely asking him to leave. It makes no sense. It makes us look weak and flat-footed on the world stage. Furthermore, if these Bloomberg reports are true, that the Biden administration deliberately tried to keep the American people in the dark so as to salvage Secretary Blinken's trip to Beijing, that's unacceptable. Allowing this to happen in order to preserve a photo op with Xi Jinping, who's committing genocide, that's foreign policy malpractice. And let's assume that the balloon was mostly harmless or we neutralized it. Do we think that the timing was coincidental? It's far more likely that they deliberately timed this in order to send a message as Blinken was preparing for his trip. And the message is, look what we can do to you and get away with. Your corporations, your career politicians, they will come crawling back. And so the message I have for the Biden administration is don't fall for the Chinese Communist Party charm offensive. It's a farce. It's a bedtime story they tell out-of-touch global elites at Davos. It's time to push back before it's too late, before something far more dangerous than a balloon is flying over American territory.
So cynical, Mike Gallagher, about our friends, the Chinese communists. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, Richard Haas is confused. Is Mike Gallagher helping us clear up that confusion?
I kind of feel like we're shooting at clay pigeons here. Like, first of all, if this had inadvertently drifted over America, and the Chinese knew that the Secretary of State was coming, and they really wanted to lower the temperature, why wouldn't they jump on the air and say, "Hey, Americans, we've inadvertently sent this balloon over there. Here it is. We're really sorry about that." They didn't do that. Why did they lie about it in the most egregious and obviously, explain that you can prove this is a falsehood? Claiming that it's a weather balloon. First of all, when it flies over military targets, and when you can monitor the transmissions from the balloon, and if they're encoded, which they must be, nobody encodes weather data. So it's not. He's completely wrong. It's not consistent with the charm offensive. It's true that the Chinese have been on a charm offensive, but we know that charm offensive is feckless. We know it's not sincere. They're continuing to fund and support the Russian war against Ukraine. The charm offensive is mostly aimed at the global South to actually make them anti-American. So Haas's notion that somehow they're lowering the temperature here is ridiculous. Now, what they are trying to do is this administration wants a nice, comfortable China, and they want to play it the U.S. for that. And so, actually, when Blinken's coming and they're actually sending a balloon over, and we're trying to hide the fact from the American people, to make this look really, really bad.
Well, the balloon was flying.
And it does look like they were trying to. It does look like they were trying to hide this from Americans because they wanted the trip to come off, and then to cancel the trip, not just after they made the announcement, but after the giant blowback. Because only after the blowback happened, that all of a sudden they decided, we're outraged by this. They wanted the trip to go through, and they wanted to hide the balloon. That is the one set of data that we have that cannot be disputed.
So China's response, they're expressing strong dissatisfaction and protest over the use of force by the United States. How much is this going to strain the U.S.-China relationship going forward?
Well, this has been nonsense, sir. First of all, that comment, by the way, is not aimed at us because we know it's stupid and laughable. It's aimed at the countries that they want to be anti-American, to give them a reason to be anti-American. So it just shows, and this notion that somehow that we can fix this relationship, that this is a couple that just needs therapy. This is nonsense. This is an aggressive adversarial power that's doing exactly what it wants. And this notion is, how do we get the relationship back on course? That's like having dinner with Hannibal Lecter and saying, how do we agree on the menu? This is not going to happen.
Well, Anthony Blinken, in announcing his decision to postpone his trip because, the conditions are just not ripe for the very constructive dialogue that would happen. He had this to say. So he's much more sanguine about the prospects to get along with the Chi-Coms, particularly, with John Kerry, the climate czar, trying to get them on board for all of our emissions goals. Here's Blinken.
We concluded that conditions were not conducive for a constructive visit at this time. In my call today with Director Wang Yi, I made clear that the presence of this surveillance balloon in U.S. airspace is a clear violation of U.S. sovereignty and international law, that it's an irresponsible act, and that the PRC's decision to take this action on the eve of my planned visit is detrimental to the substantive discussions that we were prepared to have. I told Director Wang that the United States remains committed to diplomatic engagement with China and that I plan to visit Beijing when conditions allow.
Boy, the Politburo there in Beijing must have been wetting themselves after those comments by Blinken, huh?
This is the funny part of the whole thing. It's like, the tragedy here. We could not get Blinken to Beijing. This guy's like 0-3 with the Chinese there. Every time he comes, they mop the floor with him. And somehow it's like, oh my God, isn't this terrible that we couldn't send Blinken to Beijing? Isn't this bad that we couldn't have Pee Wee Herman fight Muhammad Ali? I mean, come on.
But when conditions are ripe for a constructive engagement, Anthony Blinken will be there, Jim.
the conditions will be right when the government in Beijing collapses and they're all lined up against the wall and shot by the Chinese people.
No, there you go. That's the kind of rhetoric that we need from a Secretary of State. You should put your resume in. All right. So, Jim, you wrote a piece for Fox News that suggested that the Luft balloon there over Big Sky Country before it met its demise over Gulf Country in Myrtle Beach there. This is not the only seismic intelligence failure of the Biden administration vis-a-vis the Chinese communists. Some other ones that come to mind.
Well, I'll just mention one because it's a long list, and that is, anytime there's a potential compromise of U.S. intelligence, there's an assessment done by the intel community. And so it's pointing out, like Hunter's laptop, which even Hunter says is Hunter's laptop, that there's got to be widespread concerns about intelligence compromise and assessment of what that might mean. Where is it? So what that means, one of two things. Either the intelligence community didn't do one, which would be completely irresponsible, or they did it and we're not seeing it. And so the point is, the balloon thing is just a consistent pattern from this administration where we're not seeing timely critical intelligence on China. And I'm not asking, tell us secrets, but the fundamental judgments on what the Chinese are doing. And so one of two things are going on here. Either the intelligence community is not collecting good intelligence on China, which is scary enough, or we're playing politics with this. And we're consciously suppressing critical information about China because it's not politically convenient to the administration, or because it's interfering with their ability for John Kerry to fly over and have tea in Beijing.
We're seeing reports of a second Chinese spy balloon that's flying over South America. I know what we should do if it enters American airspace, but what should we do vis-a-vis our allies, in quotation marks, in South America and the Chinese spying there?
See, this to me is the big question. Why are they doing this? The Chinese have very exquisite low Earth orbit satellite intelligence. Gives you exactly the same thing. So why balloons? Now, you could maybe convince me that, look, nobody has 100% global coverage and you want some intel, so I could see sending the balloon into maybe places in Latin America that you don't have satellite coverage. I don't know. But obviously they have satellite coverage over U.S. military targets. So why are they sending the balloons over here? So what's going on here?
Well,
What are the Chinese up to? What niche capability or need do they have for these balloon things? And that I don't understand. And to me, that's the real serious question, because the only thing I agree with Richard Haas on, and you should note this because I'll probably never say that again, is the Chinese do things with intentionality. So what are their intentions in this balloon intelligence collection?
Well,
and I think that's a really good question.
Well, they flew over several military bases. If you look at its track, was that planned? The surveillance balloon was the size of 3 school buses, solar powered, and had this metal fin to maneuver the balloon. So did they gain any information by flying over those military bases?
Well, to me, this is a good question. See, one of the things is that we do know, we know the Earth rotates. So we know when the satellites are going to be overhead. And anybody who's seen any Tom Clancy movie knows that, people know when these satellites are coming overhead and they shut down everything they don't want the satellites to see. So did they think they were going to sneak a balloon over and see things that the satellites couldn't see? Did they logically think they could get a balloon over here and nobody would notice? So I really don't know the answers to these questions. And to me, they're the real critical questions, which is, why are the Chinese doing this? The problem is, and this is the thing you've hit on in the show, the problem is this administration is much more concerned with talking to the Chinese so John Kerry can ask them to stop building coal plants than they are about dealing with the threats to the American people.
So is it what sort of what Mike Gallagher intimated with this? This is a show of force, a soft show, but a show of force nonetheless by the Chinese communists to the rest of the world to essentially say that America is in decline. They can't even protect themselves. Their response to us is tepid. We can we can make these provocative overtures and they do nothing. They're milling about. They're as you said, feckless in terms of response. Is that the point, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we have enough data to say that yet. But here's what I will predict is that Mike Gallagher is going to be Joe Biden and Beijing's worst day ever. That the more work that his oversight committee does and the more things they expose to the public, the more this notion of we can all just get along is going to become unbelievably unsustainable.
You know, when I saw this balloon flying overhead, I kept thinking of what that Air Force general said, that we'd be with war in China in 2025 or by 2025.
Well, yeah, I do think that was a really bad story and kind of completely overblown. I mean, he wasn't making a prediction. I mean, if you listen to his remarks, I think it's pretty clear. What he's trying to say is we should be serious about dealing with the Chinese. And the thing so where would we be today? What kind of message would we be sending China today if we had implemented Joe Biden's last two defense budgets, both of which would have actually meant a real decline in U.S. military capability and power? That's what the Chinese pay attention to. I say this: the Chinese pay attention to what we do, not what we say. Biden wants them to listen to what we say and pay no attention to what we do. This is not a marriage that's going to end well.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano of the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Folks, when shopping for a home mortgage, how much is great service, low closing costs, and competitive interest rates worth to you? At Townstone Financial, it's priceless. Hi, Barry Sterner, founder of Townstone Financial. Let's hear about the Townstone experience from one of our customers.
This is John. I did my second home purchase with Townstone Financial, and Townstone's going to give the better rate by far. They found the best rates. They found the lowest closing costs. And I know that because I had previously worked with a big bank who gave me ridiculous closing costs.